Okay, welcome back to the Opperman Report Aftershow. And we are here with Betty Medsger, our guest, the author of The Burglary, um, and also Winds of Change, Framed, and Women at Work. Just want to make a little announcement here that show we just did just now. People might notice that I did the intro a little bit differently. I didn't list all the stations that we were on. That should be the first show of the Opperman Report. That will be. We've just been picked up by a whole network of AM/FM stations in 8 states, and hopefully that'll be our first show that's on there. So our debut guest was hit a home run out of the park tonight, Betty Medsger, man. What a fascinating information. Betty, everything you told us tonight was just beautiful. It's not beautiful.
Not really beautiful.
Yeah, I know.
By the way, I'm honored to be on the program as you're making those additions.
Hey, we're making history, right? Thank God. Yeah, we had a great guest too. But now you were telling us about before. What do you want to tell us first about the other books, or you want to tell us about this woman who didn't participate in the burglary?
Oh, well, it's far more interesting to talk about the burglars. There were two burglars I think that you were suggesting we might want to talk about.
Yeah.
One is the person I refer to as the ninth burglar, and this is it's a man, and he had been with them from the beginning, and he was one of the original people that Bill Davidon had asked if he would be part of the group to think about whether this should be done. And just a short time before the burglary, maybe a week, he came as usual as they gathered to begin the evening of casing, and he announced to them that he had decided not to participate. And none of them remember whether they asked him why he changed his mind. They were surprised and stunned, and they also don't remember whether he offered any explanation. They think he didn't because they think that one of them would remember. And he never showed up again. And they knew that he knew every single thing about their plans. And I think that many people in that position would say, this is no longer viable at all. But no one, they tell me, no one in the group suggested that this should make them doubt going ahead. And they continued with their plans. Just a few weeks after the burglary, he showed up at the home of John and Bonnie Raines one evening and told them, I'm thinking of turning you in.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And they were rather shocked by that. And at that point, they invited him in, and they had a conversation. And he said, I've been told that some of the files that you saw have military secrets in that are very important, and if they are revealed, that will endanger national security. And he said something about a girlfriend having learned that, and so they don't really know what that means. Whether she knew somebody who knew an informer or what. But he told them that even by the time they left, and they assured him that they had read every single file, and there was no file like that. There were no military secrets in those files. And when he left, they had no idea whether they had convinced him that he shouldn't do it. But they got an idea. They decided that it would be good if John could talk with him and in ways that would convince him that there was no material there that would endanger national security. So they called him and invited him. They said they wanted to hire him to help paint their kitchen. the following Saturday. And he agreed, and he came over, and standing on tall ladders on the opposite side of the kitchen, the two of them painted the kitchen yellow that day and talked continuously with John, trying to reassure him that there were no files that would endanger national security. And they felt that he was convinced and that he might not turn them in, but they never had any assurance from him. And after that, they never saw him again. Now, years later, when I read the 34,000-page investigation of the burglary, one of the things that I learned was that right after the burglary, two people came under greatest suspicion, were a man named John Peter Grady, who was, in fact, a big leader in the Catholic Peace Movement and the group that had been raiding draft boards. In fact, the FBI decided the day after the burglary that he had not only been involved, but that he had been the leader of the group, and they never let go of that idea, even though it was completely wrong. But the other thing that they did was place this man, the ninth burglar, under 24-hour surveillance. In fact, I'm not sure that anybody else was placed under 24-hour surveillance. Certainly none of the burglars were. And they followed him even when he moved from city to city, and he went from meeting to meeting. So he apparently was not in touch with the FBI at the time, because that surveillance continued. And then they did interview him almost 2 years later. And I've seen the record of that interview, and he did not turn anyone in. But as you can imagine, it was pretty awful when they all learned that he had said that he was thinking of turning them in. Now, the eighth burglar is a very different kind of story from that. The eighth burglar was, I refer to her that way, we couldn't find her. When they were trying to get in touch with each other to ask the question of whether or not they thought that all of them should give up the secret and tell me their story, they couldn't find her. Two of them, Keith Forsyth and particularly Bob Williamson, had been very close friends with her and tried especially hard, and so did I. Could not find her. And every once in a while during my research, I would do the search again, and so would they. And they actually thought that maybe she had been killed or she had died in some way, because they never met anyone from that era, even somebody not involved with the burglary, but anybody who had known her at that time, whoever said a word about her. But it really seemed as though she had disappeared completely. And that was very different from what the rest of them had done, because the rest of them had stayed in Philadelphia and just lived in plain sight, living as they always had. One thing we haven't mentioned was that John and Bonnie Raines had 3 children under 8 at the time. And so that they were continuing to live their lives, taking their kids to school, paying mortgages, and maintaining their jobs. Well, a month after my book was published, I later found out the eighth burglar became aware that the rest of them had gone public, and she was truly shocked by it. She had not seen the news stories when the book came out, and there was a story in the front page of the New York Times and lots of other stories based on that. And she hadn't seen any of that, but by the end of the month, she did. And when she Googled media, when somebody suggested that maybe she'd like to take a trip to Philadelphia, and she hadn't been there since 1971, and so she just thought she'd check up on what's happening in media, and all these stories about the burglars becoming public poured out. She lived by that time in a small town in Arizona. And she then got in touch a couple months later with Bob Williamson, the person with whom she had been closest, and wanted to know what in the world was going on. And he explained it all. And she came fairly quickly to think that, yes, this was a good thing, that the story was being told. But what had happened was that shortly after the burglary, she could see that in the neighborhood where she lived, Paulton Village, a neighborhood where many anti-war activists lived near the University of Pennsylvania, she could see that there were FBI agents all over the place. And she decided, it's not safe to be here. I'm leaving. So she decided she would go underground, live under an assumed name west of the Rockies. And that's what she did. She drove to Albuquerque, New Mexico, and a couple of weeks after she arrived, she chose her assumed name and never was in touch after that day with anyone from her past, burglars or non-burglars, and not in.
Wow.
Isn't that amazing?
For how many years?
For 10 years,
Okay.
She remained underground, not using her name. At the end of a decade, she wanted to do more than live hand to mouth. She wanted to get a real job.
Sure.
And so she decided that she would. She needed a training course, and she needed to enroll, and this would mean using her Social Security number and her real name. And then a lawyer advised her against it, but she decided to move ahead, and she did, and nothing happened. What she wanted to do, by the way, was to become a forest ranger, which she did. And then after a while, she became a horticultural therapist, which she has done for all the years since then. But when nothing happened, she again felt safe. And although she used her name, she kept the secret. She never told anybody, and she never got back in touch with anybody she knew in the past. And so she was the youngest person at the time of the burglary, 19.
Wow. And
she was 63 last year when she just made this discovery. And then Bob got in touch with me and said, and she'd like to talk to you. So I interviewed her at length. And when my paperback came out last fall, her story is the epilogue in the paperback. And her story is quite amazing. She continues to live as she did west of the Rockies, but she's now made a point of going back to all the people she was closest to at that time, and reestablishing friendships that were suddenly cut off then.
Man.
And she also shares although she was very upset when she found out that they had revealed the secret, she now has also spoken publicly and feels that it's a very positive thing for people to find out about it.
Yeah, you know, this is a beautiful story. You know, it's a human interest story.
Each one of them has what I think is a beautiful, beautiful story to tell. Her story, for instance, includes such basic things as having left home when she was a teenager and not having a relationship with her family, and going back, finally making a decision after she had taken her name back to build a relationship that really never existed very strongly in the first place. Moved for 2 years to where her parents had retired, got a job working in a Sears store plant shop, and lived near them so she could have dinner with them every night and create a family relationship that hadn't existed before, but in fact actually became quite warm and positive. And then years after that, when her parents were quite sick and older, they came and they spent the last 5 years of their lives with her, and she took care of them until they died. She's really quite a remarkable person.
These are real heroes who made a huge sacrifice in their life for all of us. You know,
they did.
Yeah.
That's key. They really did it with the public interest in mind. That this is Bill Davidoff puts it in really strong terms that what was happening was a crime against democracy that needed to be stopped. Nobody in Congress was going to stop it. The Attorney General wasn't going to stop it, and the presidents were not going to stop it.
And we wouldn't know about it if it weren't for this burglary.
That's right. That's right. That's right. I mean, it really does show. I mean, you can't expect many people to be willing to do this kind of thing, but it really does show that people can, and this is nonviolent. They were very strong on nonviolence. They were part of the Catholic peace movement, although only one of the burglars was Catholic, but they were part of that group that had done draft board raids. And they were very strong on being nonviolent, but also in revealing to the public information it needed.
And none of them have changed their beliefs, their political leanings, you know. Because I know my brother was a lefty, you know. He's about 20 years older than me, and now he's so right wing. And people I grew up with, because I was a yippie myself. I was an activist in New York City, Lower East Side, and so many people I grew up with, you know, knew at the time, and now they're just hypnotized. And
only one of them has changed politically. I think. I mean, they certainly haven't continued to do these kinds of things.
Well, we don't know.
But they've been politically engaged in their communities, and some in very strong ways. But one of them describes himself, and he's quite eloquent about this in the documentary 1971. But he describes himself as a much more conservative person than he was then. That now, for instance, I can't say it exactly as he did, but he said, I believe in change one pebble at a time, that I wouldn't try anything so dramatic again. And he also, I mean, he really changed politically. He voted for Bush twice.
Wow.
But he's an evolving person. He's a very interesting person.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, boy. Okay, so the other books, Winds of Change, Framed, what's the story with that?
Framed is back to my investigative journalism. Framed is a story about an effort in California that started as soon as Jerry Brown, the first time he was governor, appointed Rose Bird as Chief Justice of the California Supreme Court. And she became a lightning rod for the right wing at that time. And the death penalty was a crucial issue in how people assessed the Supreme Court. And in 1973, the California Supreme Court had overturned the death penalty. And as the cases came up, Rose Bird had not approved any of the cases of people who were going to be sent to death. And so the attention focused on her, and she turned out to be an easy lightning rod. And in the end, what happened was that as she came up for approval by the electorate, you're appointed to an appellate court position in California by a governor. And then at the next election, you're up for yes or no, supposedly based on your qualifications. You don't have an opposition candidate. It's just yes or no on you. And in the history of California, no appellate judge had ever been rejected. And at that time in 1978, I think it was, she almost was rejected, and it resulted in there were accusations made about mishandling of cases by her and a supporter inside the court. And I did an investigation that found that what was actually happening was that there was a collusion between the right-wing organization on the outside, which involved a member of the state senate who was also the founder of the Gun Owners of California, a collusion between him and two members of the Supreme Court who were together moved cases around in such a way that it appeared that she had engaged in wrongdoing when in fact they had engaged in wrongdoing. And finally, and so I wrote that book in 1983 explaining what had actually happened. And then in 1986, that movement had grown considerably, and she and two other justices were, in fact, voted off the court at an election. And that was the first time that had ever happened. So that's that book. And then the other book is something that has a specialized audience of journalism educators and some journalists. The other was a national study that I did of the education of journalists. And it was a study of journalism education and what it was accomplishing or not accomplishing. And I did some survey work as part of it. And one of the things that I found that I think is probably still true is that no matter what measures, what measures you look at to determine who the best journalists are, that it turns out that it's usually people who did not study journalism, but instead studied literature or history, those two things, but just had a passion for finding information and conveying it to the public. So
very interesting. I'd like to have you back, maybe for like a member section show. We can do like an interview in the afternoon one day to cover both of those books. If you,
Well, I would enjoy talking about it, I'm sure, but I should warn you that they're old, so that the research that I'm talking about, for instance, with the education of journalists, goes back to 1996, so it may not be applicable to today. I won't extrapolate and assume that it is.
Okay. Now, what about, is anything you're working on in the future?
No, I've been continuously working on things related to the burglary book, coming out and speaking and writing occasional opinion articles, and that's been quite time consuming, as a matter of fact.
And what about a website? You don't have a website, do you?
No, I do. Theburglary.com.
Oh, get it? I'm so sorry. Theburglary.com. Okay, I'll make sure we put that up on the blog. I'm sorry about that. Theburglary.com.
And I should also, but at that site, you'll see that a very nice thing happened with the book, that Investigative Reporters and Editors, which is a wonderful organization of investigative journalists that was formed 40 years ago. And they give out awards for investigative reporting. And they named The Burglary the best book of the year. And so I was very grateful for that.
Very good. Congratulations. I'm getting a question from the chat room. What does she think of journalists today? What do you think of journalists today?
Well, that's a huge question.
Yeah.
And during the past year and a half that I've been traveling around and talking and meeting a lot of people in journalism that I wouldn't otherwise have been meeting, there are extremes in every facet of it. There are extremes in terms of the numbers, the decline. There also are extremes in the quality, excellent, far better than anything that existed when I was on newspapers, and then the most superficial stuff that's ever existed. It's, the market has changed just enormously and in so many different ways. There is so much more good journalism out there, but it doesn't present itself to us the way it did before. Journalism, you picked up the newspaper on the street, you had it delivered to your home, or you might turned on to the few news programs that existed. I, every day, can and do go online, and I read regularly newspapers that I would have never had access to before. I can do that on a regular basis, but I can also go to an aggregator such as Truth Out, Common Dreams, and others that are organizations out there going through things that I would never have time to go through, both broadcast journalism, print journalism, and blogs, and picking out things and putting them on their lists that I then can go through every day and scan and pick out what I think I will want to read later and send it to myself. So to find the good journalism today that is just so much of it is so much better than anything that's been done before. It requires you to be active. It requires you to take the initiative and go find it. And that we could be much more passive about getting our journalism in the past. And there are good aspects of that and bad aspects of it. I happen to love it, but I also feel that for the average person who's not a journalism nut like I am, or have special areas of interest like surveillance that I'm looking for all the time, for the average person, the average citizen who needs to be informed, their lives are consumed by 1,000 things, taking care of their families, going to games and so on. It's less likely to happen. So that the potential is there, but moving from being a passive consumer of journalism to an activist thing is something that has to be learned, and I worry about that. Now, on the other hand, looking at other aspects of it, there's absolutely terrible stuff out there that isn't based on people doing very careful research. And so I worry again about that being mistaken for journalism, and that there's much more of that problem than there was before. Those problems are big, and of course the economic model of the mainstream press continues to be a problem that's not being solved, and where more and more layoffs take place, especially in the mid-size and the small-size press. I may worry about the large organizations, but I really worry about the mid-size and the small-size forms of journalism, both broadcast and print and online, because they have to have an economic base. And where the growth is, where the new forms are coming from, the advertising doesn't generate much money. So it's still, after 20 years, it's still very difficult to know how it's going to be possible to create good journalism, the kind that requires money to pay people to do research.
Right.
There's some very good models right now. CIR, as a matter of fact, CIR is an old model, but it's really been enlarging and increasing. CIR is the Center for Investigative Reporting. It's based in based in the Bay Area. And it's actually been around since the 70s, and it came into existence originally because there was so little investigative reporting in the West. I mean, even at the Los Angeles Times until the late 70s and early 80s, investigative reporting about big issues in the West was hard to find, and in San Francisco it was almost impossible to find, although that changed too for a while. But CIR came along and raised foundation money and did great work. They also formed partnerships with things like Frontline. They still do. And now they have a number of partnerships, and they still have to depend on raising that foundation money. And so others are now doing similar things. And some seem to be able to make it, but it's so dependent on whether those private sources of money stick with you and also don't try to control you.
Yeah, but yeah, I'm from New York, and so are you.
Well, not originally.
Oh no, really? Oh, really? But okay.
I grew up on a small farm in western Pennsylvania.
Okay, that's close enough. Okay, because I'm thinking about when I was a kid, ABC, Sunday, the news shows on Sundays, Gil Noble, Like It Is, William F. Buckley, both sides, but there was more depth to the discussion than you have anywhere today. Maybe some of these wacky internet stations and stuff like that. But you know what I mean? It seemed like it was more mainstream back in those days to have intelligent discussion that you could absorb throughout the day. You could watch Gil Noble, you could watch William F. Buckley, and have WBAI on the radio, and even mainstream.
But those stations were unusual. Most of the United States didn't have access to anything like that. It was the West Coast, the East Coast, and Chicago. Now, I can go on the internet and I can listen to a radio station anywhere in the world. And I think my memory of when I was very young was that there were 3 networks. Yeah, and everybody, the critics then were saying they're all alike. No, there's nothing except a middle of the road expression, except for rare occasions. I think if you go back and look, the golden era, wasn't so golden.
But when I turn on the radio now, and I hear Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity telling me that Obamacare that Obama's a socialist.
No, I guess
He's a Marxist.
For you and a few other people that radio is another thing. Radio really is dominated by a lot of right-wing programming.
Oh yeah, there's a ceiling. There's places I can't go. They won't. They'll shut me down just because of my opinions, openly. And then make it very obvious.
Well, and you've just mentioned something that's probably very important, because I guess when people are on the road so much, and so we should care a lot about what radio is.
Yeah.
Because as they're driving, that's what they're listening to.
And even I listen to it. When I'm driving, you're in the car. You have to put on Hannity in the afternoon. You got to put on Limbaugh. You got to put on Hannity. Otherwise, there's nothing else. You
won't listen to NPR.
I don't think I get it here. I don't even think I get it here in Vegas. I don't think we have it. But I'll listen to it. But I don't know. But you know what? You have encouraged me. I tell you, as cynical as I am.
Well, let me tell you an experience I had. I mentioned the IRE award. I had the pleasure of therefore going to their convention. Their annual national convention was in early June in Philadelphia. These are reporters and editors from broadcast, television, radio, and print, and these are really committed. Their conventions are workshops. Their whole purpose is we teach each other and we support each other, and that's been true for 40 years. They've been an amazing influence on investigative reporting, and it started from the ground up. It was these reporters and editors. And at that convention, it was the largest convention in their history, 1,800 people. And what was really maybe it's not so amazing, but it felt like it to a lot of us, how young the majority of the people were 40 or under, and many in their 20s. And people who had made sacrifices to come and be at this convention because they knew that they would have a chance to be in these workshops and get better skills. So, and that was a big topic of conversation there, because the national organization does a lot of things the rest of the year with people too. And how many young people are wanting to do investigative reporting and getting in touch with IRE all the time on how they can do various aspects of the profession. So I also found great hope in that.
You're on Facebook, right?
I am.
What do you think of this phenomenon of these totally hoax news websites that are partially hoax and partially fake and red flag news, this stuff, and before it's news, where pretty much anybody can put up whatever they want. There's no editorial control, whatever. You can just make stuff up about Fukushima, whatever you want, and it gets up there right away.
Well, I have to say I don't follow anything like that. I'm appalled by the existence of such things. Of course, I feel that way about a lot of commentary. I mean, it's very easy for people to say anything they want when they're working on their own, and there's no editing process going on. So I think that the saddest thing about that is that people are taken in and don't have an ear for the fact that there might be something wrong and that they should do some checking.
Yeah,
but
no one checks. Yeah, and it's a new phenomenon, in the last.
You mentioned it after you mentioned Facebook. Are you saying that it's mostly on Facebook?
Oh yeah, and people they don't bother checking at all, and you'll see they look like almost like real news sites, and the story will be ridiculous, and all you have to do is just Google it, put the word hoax in front of the title.
Yeah.
And it comes right up that it's just nonsense. It's some foolishness, and it goes on all day long. And people get mad at me when you show them, listen, it's a hoax. They get mad at you because they want to believe it.
Yeah, and all of this is also leads to something else that should be of deep concern, and that is cynicism. That when you want to believe, people who want to believe something like that, if they do find out it's not true, then what do you believe? And you don't have the tools to figure things out. Cynicism is a very dangerous thing. And that takes me back to Bill Davidoff, who really was quite a remarkable person. One of the things that really concerned him deeply around 1970 was the growth of cynicism at that time in the anti-war movement, and the easy, after such deep frustration, and then the growth of cynicism, some people in the movement being willing to either just tune out completely or go over to a very small number going over to being violent. And that's why he thought it was so important to think as hard as he could about new ways to protest, and also new ways to try to be effective as a citizen. And you do have the feeling with the kind of thing that you're talking about, that the end result may be people just feeling cynical and not believing very much, but also not believing that they should. There's a place for them to have a role.
Just imagine if all these groups that had went to making little pipe bombs, planting little pipe bombs and doing these kind of these actions, if they had done similar actions to this, exposing information, how we might have gotten some real change.
Well, I think that's a nice idea.
Yeah.
I don't, we're really talking about a relatively small number of people that engaged in those kinds of things, and most of them were in fact very good people, and some of them in fact were people that Bill had been students of Bill's, or people that he had known from the movement, and they could have gone in that very positive direction. It was such an unusual time, and the hatreds were so deep that you can reluctantly see why some people were driven. I'll just give you one example briefly. In my book, when I'm describing, I felt that one of the most difficult things to do was to create the atmosphere of that time so that people could understand that why people would even think of such an extreme idea of breaking into an FBI office. I mean, it was an extreme time on both sides to some extent. And 1970 was this parade of extreme things. And there had been the weather bombing of in the village in which 2 members were killed when their bomb accidentally went off. That was in March. And then in April, Nixon announced that as of that night, we were invading Cambodia. And people just could not believe that not only was the war increasing, but there had been secret bombing of Cambodia and Laos, and now there was going to be a ground war in Cambodia. Instead of the war winding down, the war was winding up. And the next day there were demonstrations, even on small campuses where there had never been demonstrations. But then that was on a Friday, and the students were killed at Kent State the following Monday, and something like that had never happened.
Right.
And that was also just incredibly extreme, and such depression and cynicism set in. And I had forgotten this, and I find that many of my friends who were around at the time had also forgotten it, but it really symbolizes what the time was like. The following Friday, Mayor Lindsay in New York had declared that a day of mourning for the students who had been killed at Kent State. And students from around the New York area, college students, high school students from the New York area, had gathered in a park in downtown Manhattan for a vigil. And it was a very quiet, peaceful vigil. And all of a sudden, some of the workers, actually from the World Trade Center, came, and they had big tools, crowbars and other things, wrapped in American flags. And they waded into the group of protesters and started beating them. And so the protest broke up, of course. The group broke up and they started running. And many people were seriously injured. NYU Medical School set up a clinic at Trinity Church with the medical cross on a flag outside, and the construction workers tore it down. And dozens of people were very seriously injured. 2 weeks later, Nixon invites 20-some of the construction workers to come to the White House for him to thank them for their role in putting down the students that day in New York. Now, I just think that illustrates the extreme nature of what was going on at that time.
Yeah, I can remember the front page of the newspaper with the yellow hard hats. These guys out there.
Yeah,
just busted
it was a
up.
huge story.
That's
in
right.
All the papers, yeah.
And you talk about the Kent State. We're trying to get Bill Kunstler's daughter is trying to reopen that investigation and get new hearings and stuff like that on the Kent State murders of those students at Kent State University.
Well, I know there have been some efforts to do that, and I think nothing has come from it in the past.
I know. Nothing yet, hopefully. Okay, Betty Medsger, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me.
No, thank you very much. Okay, we had a real education tonight, and I can't thank you enough. Betty Medsger, the author of The Burglary. Her website is theburglary.com. And books Winds of Change, Framed, and Women at Work. You can find all the links to these books at the OppermanReport.com. Betty, thank you so much. Okay, good night.
Thank you very much.
Oh, boy, what a wonderful woman. And you can see her picture there on the Opperman Report blog. Just a beautiful, wonderful woman. And these are the kind of heroes that our kids should know about. I'm going to have my daughter listen to the show for sure. Oh, by the way, hey, I see Jessica Smith in the chat room there. I know she just turned 21, and I want to wish you a happy birthday, Jessica. We love you, and thank you for all your support going on there. But we got big news, guys. Let's see if I got my notes here. If you noticed, I did the intro a little bit different tonight because we're getting picked up by a whole bunch of AM/FM stations. So it's really, really important right now. And one of them is right here in Las Vegas, on the Las Vegas Strip. So we're going to be hitting all those people. So it's a big deal, okay? I need your help with this. I need your support with this. We got to come up with some sponsors, man. I just need like 3 sponsors a week, new sponsors, $25 a piece, to get us through this little hump here, the next thing we're going through here, to get on all these AM/FM stations. But this will be a big push for us here. We'll get this stuff going, and it'll get us beyond all these problems that we're having with these stalkers and the sabotage that we're going through here. So, really need your help with that. Also, the YouTube channel is still down, okay? Hopefully we'll get it back up. YouTube doesn't really seem to communicate with you very, very much in the current form of communication that I'm dealing with them right now. But we have my old YouTube channel, which is the Ed Opperman YouTube channel. So if you go to YouTube and type in Ed Opperman, you'll see me. You see my picture there? I think it's the same picture I use on Facebook. But you see my picture there. I need you guys to subscribe to that channel because I can't really do much with that channel until I have 1,000 subscribers. Then we can go back to putting up all the content from the member section up on that YouTube channel. So that's what's going on with that. Coming up, we got Tom Secker. He's going to be talking about the 93 World Trade Center bombing. And he's done a lot of research on it, all into the blind sheik and all that kind of stuff, and these characters that were running around New York City. They killed Myra Kahana. They shot up this school bus that was involved with this yeshiva. A lot of stuff was going on around then. There were red flags that should have been obvious. So I'm interested in what Tom Secker, I think he's in the UK, and he's from the website The Boiling Frog. So he has real credentials over there, and I'd like to hear what his research he's done on this. Then we have Donald Kessler, who is a New York Times best-selling author. He wrote these books about Adnan Khashoggi and about Bill Clinton and the Secret Service, and he just came out with this information about Bill Clinton and his mistress, his current mistress, that is codenamed the Energizer. So now we got him coming on, right? But we also, I'm talking to Paula Jones. I talk to Paula Jones almost every day, And I talk to Paula Jones all the time. She was a victim of Bill Clinton, and I'm trying to get her to call in during the Don Kessler show, or at least call me during the week and record something, and I think I'm going to get her to do it, okay? So that will be a historic show, and we'll get that out. We'll put a press release out on that. Okay, what else is going on? Let me see what's going on here. Some questions in the chat room. How do you make a heart? I don't know. Okay. Let's see, what's going on? After Tom Secker and Donald Kessler, I have a big show coming up about Adnan Khashoggi. But in that show, we're going to be getting into some other topics as well with that guest. This is a big guest, by the way, guys. Okay, big guest. Can't mention his name because of the situation we're under right now. And that is, we're going to be talking about Adnan Khashoggi, his connections to Trump, his connections to drug smuggling, Iran-Contra, and all that kind of stuff. Since I started working on this Adnan Khashoggi stuff, I'm in touch with some serious people here that'll give me a lot of information. But getting guests on the show is a little more difficult. So this guest is a number one rated guest here. You're going to love him. I got Melvin Dumar. This is going to be going into the members section. Melvin Dumar is going into the members section. He's the guy that gave Howard Hughes a lift on the highway over here in Las Vegas. And then there was a will, and then his lawsuits and all kinds of stuff like that. So he had a former FBI agent do some research and investigation to this stuff like that. And there seems to be some validity to Melvin Dumar's will. So we'll take a look at that. We have the daughter of Malcolm X coming on the show. That'll probably be in the member section. And then a friend of my dad named Bob Sacchi, who is a Humphrey Bogart impersonator, who did a bunch of movies, played against Sam, all kinds of stuff. And he was a boxing promoter, all kinds of fascinating stories about Hollywood and interesting things like that as well. Okay, hey, if I know anybody in Idaho, okay, my PI business, I'm doing a little merger over in Idaho, and I'm working on some stuff over there. So if you want to get involved with that, give me a call at oppermanreport@gmail.com. You can shoot me an email, okay? Let's see, what else? That seems to be everything on my notes. Oh, you know what? I want to give a shout-out to Paul Scala. Paul, I love you, man. I really do. Paul was one of the kids in my youth group when I was an assistant youth pastor over at Calvary Assembly of God about 25 years ago. And it's his wedding anniversary this week. And he's got a beautiful wife. He's got 4 beautiful kids. And, he wrote me a really, really lovely Facebook message. And about, believe it or not, how I was a good influence in his life. Can you imagine? But you know what, man? He tells some funny stories, too. There was this one funny story about when we were at a youth convention up in upstate New York. And I was so tired because I had flown from Arizona back to New York, and then I had to drive up to Buffalo, New York, where this freaking youth convention was, and I was exhausted. And but Paul, it was a big, tough kid. These guys, the kids had gone out and they went to a police supply store up there in upstate New York, and they bought these handcuffs. And Paul handcuffed himself in front of himself, and he lost the key. And I was so pissed off. I wanted everybody to go to bed. I was all mad at everybody. And something happened. Somehow, I challenged these kids to a push-up contest to make them go to bed. And he still talks about the story about how I beat all these kids at this push-up contest, I guess I was about 31 years old or something like that. But, Paul, I love you, man. And happy anniversary. You got a beautiful family today, man. Congratulations. Hey, you know what? I tell you what. I might go a little bit longer if somebody wants to call in. I'd like to talk about Donald Trump. And the world going crazy and Rosie O'Donnell there. Because I got to tell you something, man. To me, it's just the craziest thing in the world. I cannot imagine, I'm 52 years old. And I remember seeing when Ronald Reagan was running for president and how everybody was all upset and because we had an actor running for president. And here we got this reality TV clown, Donald Trump, running for president. Oh, you know what? One more thing. Look, I can't. We're going to lose Awake Radio. Good night, guys. But if anybody wants to call in, 702-605-4894. I can do another 15, 20 minutes. We take a couple phone calls. But when I see what's going on here, we got this clown, Donald Trump, running for president of the United States, and then we have a presidential debate where one of the first questions that they asked this guy involves Rosie O'Donnell. You know, that the name Rosie O'Donnell would come up at a presidential debate in this country is so disturbing to me, and it's so upsetting. And that this clown would be taken seriously. Everything that I'm reporting on this clown, but even this whole business about this Trump University scam that he's running, that's right now as we speak is being shut down and being sued by the Department of Consumer Affairs in New York State, and they don't mention that even in passing. They don't mention his relationship with Epstein. They don't mention his relationship with Khashoggi. This is just like nothing. So I got to tell you, it's really heartbreaking to me to see people falling for this, and to see people on Facebook saying that they support Trump. You know, I think I've given and I got all the information off the top of my head, but it seems like it's useless to even discuss it and try and tell people about Trump. No one cares. I've been chatting back and forth with people who I formerly respected. You know, well, I don't care. I still support Trump. Well, you know, he's hooked up with this pedophile. I don't care. Well, he's hooked up with this drug dealer that gave money to bin Laden. I don't care. Well, he's got this scam Trump University. I don't care. The marriages, I don't care. You know, no one cares. So, I don't know what to tell you, man. For me, it's very disturbing, and it's very discouraging to see where we've come in this country. And I think we're heading for very, very dark days. And I think there's a chance that Donald Trump could be elected president, you know? And it would be like Mussolini or Hitler being elected president, a complete demagogue, like Eugene McCarthy, you know, being elected, you know? That kind of demagoguery. So it's very upsetting to me, and I don't know what the solution to it is, or even what to say about it. Well, that's about it. If you guys, the best thing you can do for me is to subscribe to the Ed Opperman YouTube channel. If you could think of anybody who would want to advertise on the show, right now we need a push this next couple of weeks to get these extra stations on. And I'm going to offer the rates so cheap, $25, okay? And you'll get an ad just like Pacific West Bamboo or the New World Mexican Women get. You know, you'll get played 4 times a show on Friday night, and it's replayed throughout the week about 100 times. You're not even paying $1 for each ad that plays, which is, you know, insanely cheap. You know, and I can tell you how many people listen to this show. So we could just get to that, and then we get the these new stations online. Also, Roku too. You know, Roku will be on Roku. Anybody out there is using Roku? You know, we'll get on there as well. So it's right on the Vegas Strip. Okay, it's a big deal. But we need some advertisers. You know, that these stations will put us on. So get a hold of me. OppermanReport.com. And we'll take it from there. All right, guys. Good night. Thank you for everything. I'll see you next week. Oh, you know what? I got some shows coming up. I'm going to be doing some live shows this week, too. I can't think of what they are right now, but I got some live free shows I'm going to be doing over the weekend. You know, on Friday, Saturday night and Sunday night. I think one is about this woman with Kelly Banansky and this woman who was on death row for many years. Wrongly convicted, and they got her off death row. And there's another one too that I'm working on. I can't remember what it is right now. But just subscribe to the Spreaker channel, and then you can get an email whenever I go live. Good night, everybody in the chat room. Thank you so much, and I'll talk to you guys over the weekend.